Without further ado, I am going to introduce our first presentation, which is a reflection from Dr. Lucy Parker. Lucy is the Deputy Head Teacher at Ludwig Nursery School in Hertfordshire. Lucy, over to you.
Thank you so much, Stella. So I'm just going to hope that technology works and just start screen sharing. So thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And exciting and a little bit nerve-wracking. So I first met Tina 20 years ago when I was a newly qualified teacher. So it's such a privilege to now be here 20 years on discussing her latest book with her. So my short presentation is going to focus on cookery and what this looks like in practice in an English maintained nursery school. So I'm very aware that we're an international audience. So just to explain, for those of you who are not familiar with an English context, maintained nursery schools are state funded by our government. We have just under 400 left in England. And my nursery school, it has 200 2 to 5 year olds in situ. And I'm based just north of London. So what I've done for the presentation is through Tina's book, I've looked at key themes, and I've chosen these alongside examples of practice in order to how to consider cookery from a Froebelian perspective. So why cookery? As many of you will know, cookery is one of Froebel's occupations. And in her book, Tina gets us to think about Froebel's gifts and occupations and the relevance that they have in today's education. And I would really concur with her suggestion that they are still highly relevant and that through important real life experiences like cooking and gardening, children can find out about their world and understand how their world is connected. So for me, cooking is a really, really engaging first-hand experience, providing children to actively learning meaningful context. And it promotes so many opportunities to support Froebelian principles. So through discussing cookery in my setting, I'm also going to highlight some important aspects of Froebelian practice, such as freedom with guidance, positive relationships, empowering parents, and interconnecting learning. And these are all themes that have come out from Tina's book, which I feel are pertinent. At the start of Tina's book, she suggests that we need to consider Froebel's principles as an interconnecting whole. And through the example of cookery, I will share what this will look like in a nursery setting. For me, this quote that Tina references by Chris McCormack is really relevant and summarises the importance of cooking for young children. One of cookery's strengths is that cross-curricular link and that ability to interconnect learning. And I think it provides children a way to develop things like early literacy and early math skills in really, really meaningful contexts. It develops language and communication. And because it's a real life experience, it gives them a meaningful context to learning. And again, this really highlights the importance of that interconnected learning, which Tina talks about throughout her book. So what does freedom with guidance look like when we're cooking? Tina considers freedom with guidance in her book and the different interpretations that it can take. Through cookery, the adult can support and guide the child. And it's important to consider that it's not always the case that the adult has the answer. Many children will come to a cooking situation, perhaps with lots and lots of knowledge of food preparation and cooking at home, but it might be that the child doesn't have much experience of this. So it's important that the adult and children work together in that group activity. Cooking also provides many, many opportunities to develop independence for the child, but also interdependence, and important examples of developing risk and challenge through using things like sharp knives, potato peelers, but also understanding how the process of cookery works right through from preparing to tidy up, with the adult and child working alongside each other and the adult guiding the child. Community relationships and developing positive relationships are central to Froebel's ideas and are highlighted in Tina's book. Sorry, I've just lost my face for a minute, I'm so sorry. In chapter 8, Tina focuses on the importance that Froebel placed on community and family. And I think she really highlights the importance of the child feeling connected to their community, not just a community. And cookery supports this sense of belonging. So cooking, sharing food and eating together is a universal shared experience. And the cooking experience provides so many opportunities, not just that experience of cooking as a group and making something, celebrating important festivals and cultural events, perhaps sharing a cake to share with friends at the end of the day, but also that part of then eating together. So for example, maybe sharing food at snack time, or the children taking food home to share with their families. So supporting all those kind of strong positive relationships and community links. We also find that cookery is really nurturing for our children, and that we have a nurture group within our nursery. And one of the key focuses of that group is cookery and sharing and eating food together. Something that also Froebel talked so strongly about was parents and families and empowering parents. And it's important to think about what that might look like now in a modern day context. Something that we discovered during lockdown was the power of cookery and sharing ingredients and recipe cards with families while they were not able to attend nursery. So we sent home simple recipe cards that the children used to share at home, and also we created home learning packs which included cookery ingredients that the children could use. We had such a positive response from the parents for this, and when we surveyed them recently to find out what they most liked about home learning, one of the things that they said they really enjoyed was cookery and baking. I think cookery also has that power to bring parents into your setting. So having cooking sessions where families can cook together is really, really empowering for parents as well. One of the sayings, phrases that Tina says a lot is link, always link. And as a practitioner, that always really, really sticks in my head. And that importance of unity and interconnected learning really, really runs through the book. And providing opportunities for children to make sense of their play and learning experience is really, really essential. What we find is that cooking impacts on other exciting and important first-hand experiences, making that interconnected learning really relevant. So for example, going to the shops to buy cooking ingredients, obviously that connection to growing and eating your own produce, things like vegetables, but also having experiences outside. So for example, in this photo, children that made chopped and made vegetable soup and then cooked it on the bonfire, and also things like toasting marshmallows. So again, all these experiences are meaning for the child and all interconnected. In chapter 4 in Tina's book, she really considers play and the symbolic life of the child. And first-hand experiences are so important in relation to play, and children will actively use their first-hand experiences in their play. They also need to have a really wide range of experiences for them to represent their ideas. And then it's important that they have access to so many different materials to develop their play and abstract thinking. And again, I think this is a really important connection to highlighting that interconnected learning. And as practitioners, it's really, really important that we consider what we are offering the children to explore and engage in. So for example, the power of using clay. And in these photos here, you can see the children representing their cooking experiences that they've had. So for example, making pumpkin soup has allowed a child to respond and represent that image of a pumpkin and what she knows about pumpkins in her clay. or chopping cakes or making pizzas. It's important children should be allowed to wallow in these experiences, and practitioners need to carefully observe and watch what children are doing and respond perhaps with relevant resources to support them. For example, offering herbs when a child wants to recreate a pizza experience. And again, these experiences can happen inside and outside. And in these cases, with these really, really rich play experiences, the child is representing their inner experiences in the outer world. So it seems appropriate to end with a quote from Tina's book. Community, how we interact with each other, closely observing children and giving them positive experiences is key. And for me, cookery encompasses all of this and many other key Froebelian principles. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. We are now going to hear from Professor Tina Bruce.
Brilliant. Oh, Lucy, that was such a treat to hear your thoughts, because I think one of the things that's so central about Froebelian education is the way that you can't separate the practice from the principles. And we want to keep moving forward with the practice. So the way that we think about the gifts and occupations now will develop, but we will be building on these treasures from the past. And so very fundamental things like having a garden, not just an area that children can play outside, but actually having a garden where we can grow things. I think you demonstrated that so well in the way that you spoke about the things that the children are doing at Ludwig's school. I mean, I had an experience this evening where we've got a family vegetable garden that's part of the community. They're called allotments in England. And we've been growing some broccoli. So this arrived home today, picked fresh, and then is cooked, and the food is shared. And this is the unity, the linking, that is such an important part of the way that we work with children, because one of the things that Froebel was very concerned was that children saw the journey of their learning. He believed that education should cause thinking in a nurturing environment. And so that sense of belonging that Lucy talked about, that feeling of being part of a community, is so important. And I know, when Stella and I have been working for some years with a community in South Africa, and they have a garden and they grow things like spinach and tomatoes, and the children help with the gardening, and then that goes into the school kitchen and they eat. So Lucy's stressed, the diversity in this all over the world, people growing food, and for children to understand, that things like apples and tomatoes or spinach, it doesn't just come from a shop, but it's something that is grown, and learning how to do that. Sometimes people say, should we still be doing things like the occupations in this day and age? But actually, if children don't understand the journey of their food, this is going to become more and more serious if we want to live in a world where sustainability and indeed stewardship of our planet is becoming increasingly urgent for us to consider. So I think all the things that we're talking about now to do with care of the planet, Froebel was addressing that in the occupations. So if we return to our roots, then this is going to be, you talked about that quote at the end, what is educationally worthwhile it is worthwhile for children to understand things which Maslow talked about being so essential. Psychologist Maslow, he talked about how things like food and shelter are crucial. So if we're helping children to think about those things, this is very, very important. And helping freedom with guidance, that's so central to Froebelian education. And what I love about it is that the adult's got to keep thinking. So the adult needs to be changing according to which child they're talking to, how much help a child needs that they've observed, to what extent the child is able to do it on their own or not. That's what I call autonomy. It's so that children are learning when they can do something on their own, but they're also learning how to get the help when they can't. Do I need to ask an adult for help? Can I ask another child? Do I need a different tool because actually this spoon isn't big enough for the stirring I want to do? All of this, and cookery is a marvelous introduction to those sorts of thinking that children need to do. And I know that during the pandemic, food has been an enormous issue for some families. And so if we're sending home little recipe books, I mean, this is one that actually comes from Scottish nursery, but it's all about how you make things. I imagine, Lucy, that those are the sort of things that have been going home, and families just love them. So I could go on talking about this forever, but just one last thought in response to what Lucy's been talking about, the symbolic life of the child. I think this is one of the deepest strengths, really, of Froebelian education, because he was very concerned that children move from the literal, the everyday things, to being able increasingly to abstract. So they have the everyday, real, first-hand experience, smelling the pumpkins, tasting bits of pumpkin. They're holding them, learning how to manipulate, to cut them up, to do the cooking. But they're also, I mean, that looked to be a lovely, typical child who's learned about pumpkins and is now symbolically representing the pumpkin. So that was quite a literal thing. And then you get a child who's often, I mean, ages don't necessarily come into this, but a very experienced cooker who knows a lot about their pumpkins and everything, who decides that they want to keep the outside of the pumpkin as a frame and cut some windows in it. They're going to eat the inside of it and turn that into lovely food to eat. And inside, they make little models of people, and they want to make furniture for another of Froebel's occupations, which is paper folding. And so they know how to fold the furniture to make little tables and chairs to go inside their pumpkin house. So that would be a greater abstraction that we might see. And I think, that is a wonderful thing, that if you've got children, it's often around 2, but ages don't necessarily come into this. And then by the time the children are moving into sort of more what we call middle childhood, they've got this really strong base of having got the ability to go from literal to more abstract kinds of symbolic representations. And of course their play is going to help them to do that. But Lucy was specifically looking here at the occupations. So cookery, clay, absolutely fantastic, and the gardening that goes with that. So Stella, I probably ought to stop now. You must stop me if I go on too long, will you?
Oh, that was absolutely perfect. Thank you ever so much, Tina.